A lot of things might come to mind when you hear the name Toyota Avalon. It's just a big Camry. It's something only old people drive. Isn't that the car from Knight Rider? But the current Avalon is so much more than a long wheelbase Camry, or something you'd find primarily in Tampa, Florida. In many ways, more than nearly any other car on sale today, it truly forces you to reconsider your motives for buying a small or mid-size SUV.
You know, other than, I want to ride up high because I'm an insecure little... What's up everyone, Jax here, and today I've got a very large and pretty impressive car, the 2020 Toyota Avalon. Let me explain about the SUV point that I made in the magical voiceover. We all know that a lot of people, myself included, buy SUVs for what they think they might need them for or be doing, not what they actually need them for or will be doing. A few years after Hallie was born, we bought a 2012 Suburban, which is an enormous SUV, and we have since driven the tires off of that thing, literally and figuratively. But that's a story for another time. And we certainly don't always need that much space. I mean, the Suburban rides terribly, it gets appalling gas mileage, and we don't even have enough children to use the third row hardly ever. And now that the girls are older and the number of times we actually fill the car to capacity has greatly diminished, the extra row and the extra space in the back go largely unused. And that point brings me to the Avalon. There are a few reasons that you might be interested in this car, so let me give you some sort of practical real-world examples that I think would apply to my own experience. Our two favorite places to go on vacation are Disney World in Orlando, Florida, and Seaside, which is between Panama City, Florida, and Destin. From Atlanta, it's about 475 miles to Orlando and 340 miles to Seaside, Florida. At 31 miles per gallon highway with an almost 16-gallon fuel tank, the Avalon has a range of nearly 500 miles, which means it can make both of those journeys without stopping and bust bladders all the way to Disney World. Seriously, I love road trips and I hate stopping. You gotta go to the bathroom, it's like an F1 tire change. Go, 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 you're on the clock. Let's get back in the car and let's go. Yeah, I know, that sounds like a lot of fun to travel with. Also, my sister lives in Houston, Texas, which is 826 miles from Atlanta. And since I'm cheap and I love road trips, we always drive to go visit her, which is a 12 to 12 and a half hour drive in the Suburban, and it requires no less than 2 fuel stops because the Suburban is great if it gets 20 miles per gallon. The Avalon could make that trip with 1 fuel stop. Why does any of this matter, you ask? Gas is cheap and SUVs are cool. Are they? Are they really? I mean really cool? Because a lot of them are shit. Yeah, sure, some SUVs are cool. Mrs. Jax loves her Suburban, which I think that generation of Suburban will go down as one of the all-time sort of classic SUV designs, especially from the 2000s. But objectively, it drives like a tank, and it's nowhere near as nice as the Avalon in ride comfort, quality, technology, gas mileage, like not even close, like miles apart. Like it's on a completely different planet.
Hey, lay off my car. I love this thing. It's okay, he doesn't mean it.
Think of it this way. At $44,000, as you see it here, the Avalon's closest price competitor in Toyota's own lineup would be like a fully loaded RAV4. The new Highlander, spec'd with comparable options, will cost about $1,000, $2,000 more minimum. And if you spec out the Sequoia with comparable options, it's $20,000 or $30,000 more than the Avalon. And on top of that, the Sequoia is trash. So just forget it, because the Sequoia sucks. I mean, who buys a Sequoia, honestly? No, really. Comment down below if you have a Sequoia, because that's sad. Did you not, like, cross-shop it with anything? Like a Suburban or an Expedition? I mean, the only thing worse than that would be if you were foolish enough to buy a Nissan Armada. So in some ways, bear with me, you're getting all of Toyota's best sort of engineering and technology at a discount. I know $44,000 is a lot of money, but compared to like what you're getting in terms of buying an SUV versus what you get with sort of the space, the grace, and the comfort of this car, it is kind of like you're getting a discount. It's got a much better ride, it gets way better fuel economy, it has as much or more tech than any of the SUVs, and all you're really giving up is some cargo capacity that you may or may not even use. Oh, and you're also getting that amazing 3.5-liter V6 that makes 300 horsepower. You know, the same one from the Camry review that I thought was just an absolute riot in that car? Well, it's here. It's present and accounted for in the Avalon. Now, don't get your hopes up. It's not quite as crazy powerful in the Avalon, or it doesn't feel as powerful in the Avalon as it does in the Camry. But combined with the 8-speed automatic, it makes the Avalon a very comfortable and very capable daily driver. And here we are driving the Toyota Avalon, which is probably a lot better than you might think it would be. The first thing that you have to notice about the Avalon is how well matched this 3.5-liter V6 is with the 8-speed automatic transmission. It is perfectly matched for the car's intended function. This isn't a sports car, it has modes. I'm not even gonna get into that because it's silly. But this engine and transmission combo is perfectly suited to this car's mission. The engine builds speed effortlessly, the transmission shifts almost imperceptibly, it doesn't hunt for gears, it's very quick to downshift, but it doesn't upshift to the highest possible gear right away, which kills the power. It is really well done. It makes this car feel a lot more capable than it is. Not that 300 horsepower isn't a lot. It makes the car feel effortless. It gives it this sort of effortless wafting down the road. The kind of thing that, like, you know, Rolls-Royce describes, it wafts down the road. The Avalon just wafts. It wafts. I'm enjoying saying that word. It wafts down the road. And it feels good doing so because that's what a car like this is supposed to do. It's supposed to waft down the road. Now, I'm on my handling road, and there's a couple of things that I would notice right away about the Avalon. One, it does float. It does float a little bit. The damping is well controlled. I took the first corner at a decent amount of speed. Body roll wasn't excessive. It doesn't bounce, but it does float. It's trying to iron out the road's imperfections, and that's understandable. This is a very large car, so there's a lot of motion to sort of deal with, especially with a wheelbase of this length. It does ride a little rougher. There's sort of a roughness to it, but it's not bad. That large bump that I've noticed in a couple other reviews was dispatched extremely easily. It did not upset the car. It didn't even reverberate through the cabin at all. There wasn't any kind of noise associated with it. But it is a little bit busy, not in an unpleasant way, but in a way that you would expect. The car is trying to sort out a very difficult road to give you the best possible ride. It's not quite as magical as something like a Lexus, like when I had the little Lexus and I was shocked by how well that rode. But this is still more comfortable than almost any car that you would be in, and the body control is admirable for a car of this size. I would say it is even comparable to the Camry that I had, which sort of had sporting pretensions, but was sort of let down by a little bit too much of that float. Let me put it this way. The Avalon floats and the Avalon rolls, as you would expect a large car to do so. I don't really know what happened to that sentence. But it doesn't wallow. To me, there's a difference. There's a difference between a car that floats and a car that wallows. Wallowing is not really desirable. It feels like a big soft car is gonna like bottom out on its suspension when it has no right to bottom out on its suspension. Almost like it doesn't have a suspension. It's just sort of floating down the road on a bucket of Jello or something. The Avalon feels very composed. It just feels like it's trying to do the work for you. It's trying to iron it out. It's sort of like, hold on, I got this. Compare it to something like the Genesis G70, which is a sports sedan and very kind of firmly sprung and damped, and you feel the impact of the road. But the Genesis goal is to stay kind of connected and flat, whereas the Avalon's is to upset your body as little as possible. And in that measure, the Avalon basically succeeds. This is an incredibly comfortable car. I'm driving right now on a stretch of road that was recently resurfaced and repaved where they built a bridge. The Avalon is serene. It's just gliding down the road. You can imagine that on the interstate, this car would be incredibly comfortable. One of the things that sticks out to me about the Avalon that I really enjoy is that the steering feels really well calibrated for this car. I was afraid that the steering was gonna be like absurdly light, like it was gonna be like wheeling the Titanic and being like, iceberg, right ahead, and then it hits, and then Jack's like, I'll never let go, Rose, and she's like, I'll never let go, and then she lets go, and he can't get on the door, and you know, selfish, whatever. But the Avalon's not like wheeling the Titanic around. The Avalon steering is actually decently weighty. It feels pretty good for a sedan of this size. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going up to the tail of the dragon to thrash this thing. I was totally expecting there to be some type of on-center dead spot because, you know, the Avalon sort of expected clientele and maybe they don't react so quickly or something like that when, you know, someone pulls out ahead of them or they mistake the brake pedal and drive into a supermarket. But the steering feels nice. The steering has a little bit of heft to it. The other thing I like about the Avalon is the brake feel. I know that's a weird thing to point out in a car like this. It's a little squidgy. It's not like super firm like you'd expect in a sporty car, but it's got a very nice linear pedal feel and you're able to come to a complete stop very smoothly. And I know, again, that's a weird thing to point out, but I've noticed in a couple recent cars that the brakes are a little overly grabby. I think when you start baking in all these safety systems and stuff like that, I don't know what causes it, but the brakes get a little grabby at low speeds especially. The Avalon's brakes feel great. Again, this isn't like a sporty sedan, but for a car of this size, it handles itself very, very well. And I think that's the main thing. Also, as you might have guessed, this interior is a really nice place to crush some miles. Personally, I think the Avalon looks really nice on the outside. In fact, I would say it's the best looking sedan in Toyota's lineup, and it's a pretty good looking sedan overall when compared to other mainstream offerings. And that sense of style doesn't stop on the outside. It totally extends to the interior of the car for the most part. You've got these comfortable leather seats with a sort of cross-stitched pattern that's like reminiscent of like a baseball glove or a baseball glove. They're not quite as stylish as those Audi TT seats from like the early 2000s. Those things were insanely cool. But they have a really nice sense of style and they're very comfortable. They're not like form-fitting, they don't hold you in place, but they're very comfortable for longer journeys, and I don't really think form-fitting seats are necessary in this type of car. And they're also not shapeless. Like, I have terrible posture and a bad back, and I feel pretty good in these seats. Although I still dream about those Civic Type R seats, like every day. And that cool stitching pattern is actually matched here on the door panels, which in my opinion is a pretty nice touch. I like that sort of continuity of design. The front seats are also heated and cooled, which you would expect at this price point, as are the rears. They are heated, they are not cooled, so if you're hot back there, you can direct the air vents towards you because it does have air vents and it does have USB charge points back there to keep your rear seat passengers comfortable and charged for longer journeys. You also have this sort of natural looking wood trim that is like supposedly real. I mean, it feels real. And the leather or leather-like trim extends down the center console all the way past the cup holders, which I like that. That's a very premium touch in this car. And whether or not it's leather, it's indistinguishable from the actual leather on the steering wheel and the seats, which feel really nice and upscale. And you have some aluminum trim sprinkled in here and there to kind of brighten things up, which is good because the interior needs it. I think this brown and black combo, or dark gray, or whatever you would call it, looks really nice. And the aluminum trim, or aluminum look trim, is a nice kind of touch. And it's restrained, it's only in a few places, and it looks good. I like restrained. I don't like everything in the kitchen sink. Sonata. It's all very nice and upscale, and to be quite honest with you guys, it feels like $44,000 well spent. When I had the RAV4 limited hybrid edition, whichever combo, that was like $44,000, and it was a really nice RAV4, but I was like in my mind going, that's a lot of money for a RAV4. To me, this feels like $44,000. It's an enormous, sort of executive-sized car with very nice appointments. When you combine the quality of the materials with the space, I can easily sit behind myself at 6.5 feet tall, which is always impressive, especially in a sedan. And then you add the technology on top of all that, the luxurious kind of appointments, the space, the serene driving experience. You really start to come up with what I think is like a genuine bargain. And this limited trim Avalon is loaded with technology. It has Toyota's full Safety Sense Plus suite along with the advanced safety package. Basically, it has sensors and cameras everywhere. And I think from the mainstream brands, Toyota's camera system is one of the best, if not the best. You have your top-down camera, your front cameras, your rear cameras. The safety systems are all really well integrated, easy to use. I like Toyota's infotainment system overall. I think Toyota's safety technology is really, really good. And as you'd expect, you have radar cruise control and lane keep assist and all those sort of assistive, not autonomous driving, don't be that guy, but all those sort of assist the window. I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Anyway, radar cruise control, lane keep assist, all that good stuff. When you combine all of these features together, Toyota's infotainment, the center screen in the gauge cluster, the head-up display, there is no shortage of infotainment, information, safety, technology. There is nothing more that you could want, especially from a car at this price point from a mainstream brand. So if someone asks what options and features your limited trim Avalon has,
all of them, I think.
Now, it's not all accolades, of course. Compared to some cars, the center stack design is a little boring. The giant screen is here, and it's flanked by Toyota's row of buttons, which is fine. It's very large and easy to read, and like I said, I think their infotainment system is one of the better systems. It could be a bit of a reach for medium to shorter drivers. I also think it's a little button heavy, and to be honest with you, the buttons feel a little cheap. I think, especially in this car where everything seems so well put together and well thought out, the buttons are kind of gray plastic or fake silver trim, and they just don't have kind of that tactile feel you get from a Mazda or a Honda. A Mazda does premium button feel really, really well, especially, you know, at this price point. So I just think it sort of stands out considering the rest of the interior is so nice. And while the rear seat is spacious, very, very spacious, I felt like the seat backs were a little bit upright. It might not bother you, like someone with a normal kind of back and posture. I felt like I was sitting a little bit upright. I like a little bit more of a slouch. And lastly, at 16 cubic feet, the trunk is big. 16 cubic feet is very large for a sedan, but it's not quite as big as you might expect it to be.
That's what she said.
There are mid-sized sedans with trunks that are nearly that large. The Honda Accord has a trunk that's nearly that large, and it's a significantly smaller vehicle than this. Even the old Ford Taurus had a trunk that was almost 20 cubic feet, but that car was trash. So I don't think you want to get a 20 cubic foot trunk and a piece of garbage like that. I would sacrifice the space to have a car this nice, of course. I'm just saying, I think the trunk should be larger, or I thought it was going to be larger based on the dimensions of the car. Maybe they traded it for rear seat space or something like that, I don't know. Overall, the Avalon's interior is an incredibly nice place to be, and you could easily imagine yourself crushing hundreds of highway miles in blissful comfort, while your passengers in the back stretch out and they remain charged and entertained. And isn't that kind of what the old school American sedan experience used to be? See, in my opinion, the Avalon is a throwback to the sort of old school American sedans that used to transport families over hundreds of miles on vacations or to sporting events or to relatives' houses. In many ways, the Avalon is currently the quintessential American sedan. I mean, it's built in Kentucky, and you know what else they build in Kentucky? They build Corvettes in Kentucky, and there's nothing more American than the Corvette. Nothing. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, mostly the 90s. Okay, so the 80s and the 90s. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and my parents bought a 92 Mercury Grand Marquis for that exact purpose. It was the yin to our Ford Kidnapper van's yang. I'm not kidding either. We had a Ford Kidnapper van. There's no other way to describe them. They're the Ford Kidnapper van. And that car drove my sister and I all over the Southeast to our various sports activities or to visit family when we didn't need to bring a lot of stuff. In many ways, the Avalon is the sort of spiritual successor to that style of travel. When you can't fly, or you don't want to fly, or you're too cheap to fly, you have a lot of miles ahead of you, but you don't need to bring a lot of things. That's kind of the reason that I would choose the Avalon when we go to Disney. We don't bring anything to Disney. When you're at Disney, you go to Disney. You don't need anything else. So the Avalon would be the perfect car to crush those 475 miles to Orlando. In fact, I kind of wish that I had the Avalon and that we had been able to take our spring break trip to Disney in Orlando, which we were supposed to do instead of... Anyway, but the major difference between the Avalon and that 92 Mercury Grand Marquis is that the Avalon's not a piece of crap. Seriously, that Grand Marquis was a piece of junk. I don't know why people even consider revering the Ford Panther platform that underpinned the Crown Victoria and the Mercury Grand Marquis, but those cars sucked. If you ever owned one, you know they suck. And that's why they're gone. See, cars didn't just magically disappear. The SUV didn't magically usurp the big American family sedan. The big American family sedan disappeared because it sucked. And there was this misplaced idea that bigger and higher meant safer. No. But the main reason those sedans disappeared is they were garbage. They were giant, unreliable, cheaply made crap. And the same qualities that made them hated were the same qualities that were sort of endearing in trucks and SUVs. And to be quite honest with you, having been in a family that had American sedans and American trucks and SUVs, the SUVs were generally more reliable and the sedans fell apart. Guys, my first car that I drove was a 96 Firebird. That car looked cool at the time, but it was junk. The 90s were a terrible time for American cars. The Avalon is like the perfect modern distillation of that style of travel. It's large, it's comfortable, it gets good gas mileage, it rides well, it can swallow 4 people and their luggage with relative ease, and it's loaded with technology. And on top of all that, it's built to Toyota's ridiculously high standards. So you know that you could crush all those miles and you could put 100,000 or 200,000 miles on this car and it will never fail. That also probably means that the roof paint won't peel off the car at about 50,000 miles, which is what happened on that 92 Mercury Grand Marquis. Seriously, through the 90s and the early 2000s, all automakers struggled with paint, but it seemed to happen a little earlier on some of those American cars. Let me just put it this way. For a lot of people, the Avalon is all the SUV they need. They just might not know it yet. I hope you like this review on the Toyota Avalon. I sort of tried to put it in a more practical sense because I think the Avalon has a place in people's lives that they just might not realize. It might be the exact kind of vehicle they're looking for, but they just don't realize it and they end up buying an SUV. For me at this stage of my life, 40 years old with a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, the Avalon actually makes a lot of sense, especially as a companion car to our Suburban. I have a 2009 Accord Coupe and I love that car. It's a fantastic car, but we can't really drive that to Disney, so we're forced to take the Suburban. I would definitely consider picking up something like an Avalon to drive the girls to their various events when driving the Suburban makes no sense at all. In fact, they are hypercritical of many of the cars that show up in my driveway. And this is one of the few recently that they both went, that looks nice. And if you have a 14-year-old, you know what a victory that is. If you like this view, please consider giving it a like. If this review brought back memories of your childhood and you're an older person like me, or maybe your parents just traveled old school and you were born later, I don't know, but comment down below on what you think. I know I didn't list all of the specs and numbers on the car. Of course, you can find them on the Toyota website. I'll link it in the description to this video in case you are a spec kind of person. I'm not as much, I'm more of an experience type of person. And as an experience, the Toyota Avalon had a very pleasurable stay with us. I just personally wish that I could have used it more to its potential. And I really am not kidding, I would have loved to have this car if we had had our spring break trip to Disney, which was rescheduled for Thanksgiving break. So fingers crossed, life returns somewhat back to normal by Thanksgiving break. If you made it this far in the video, comment down below what vacations or big plans did you have that have been interrupted, and I hope, like us, and I hope that yours could be rescheduled or refunded or changed. Thankfully, most vendors seem to be really good about that, and maybe you'd consider taking your next road trip in something like an Avalon instead of spending a whole bunch of money on an SUV for a perceived need that you may or may not have. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Jax, and I will catch you in the next review. Ride safe, drive safe. Peace. Also, by the way, we are now at time of filming currently in week 4 or 5 or even 6, depending on where you live, of quarantine lockdown. I truly hope that everything is going well with you. I know 22 million Americans at the time of this recording have filed for unemployment. It has a devastating effect. So I'm sending my well wishes to you guys. Know that we are doing, me and Mrs. Jackson, the girls, doing everything we can locally to buy from local people. And I encourage you to do the same. Buy local, support your small businesses, get takeout whenever you can, if you can afford it. Do your part to help the people around you. And that's the only way that we're gonna get through it. And we will get through it. So I'm sending my well wishes to you guys wherever you are worldwide. I hope things are better soon. Take care. It's like an extremely happy bird. Why are you driving down this parking row of all the parking rows? I used to drive around blasting music with my windows down. I guess I can't judge. But, well, that car came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. I was afraid for a second the police were like shutting down my filming location. That would have been bad. Then the rest of this review would be brought to you from the driveway, which that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Oh, he literally pulled into my filming spot. Do you mind if I park right in front of you? I film car reviews right here. Okay, I didn't want to get in your way or anything. I'm not worried about the parking. Okay. Very nice, police officer.